Hi YouTube! It's been a long time since I've actually posted any videos, but what prompted me was the pagan YouTube pagan challenge that Annika had started. I went and joined the Facebook group because I wasn't on there before, but I figured, excuse me, that having the topics would be a great way to get back into making videos again. So this will be week 1, which is how you found your path. I'll probably do week 2 right after this one. Then I'll be caught up. But basically for me, I was probably about 7. I was attending for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. I was attending a private Lutheran school. But I was at the same time also attending a Unitarian Universalist church with my great-grandparents. As you can imagine, this made for some conflicting ideals in a small child's brain. For good though, it's for the best. But having those two sort of, not so much opposing views, but one of them coming from very much a one-way type of religion, and then having the UU where it's very much inclusive, definitely shaped a lot of my thoughts very early on. I had stopped going to the school because it was very small. My best friend had actually ended up moving to the other side of the state, and there weren't really other kids that I was friends with, so that's when I decided to make the change from a private school to a public school because my mom let me make that choice at that age. But I remember I stopped going to the UU church with my great-grandparents because one of the days in the religious education part of it, the teacher had said that in some cultures, the sun was a god and the moon was a goddess. And coming from the Lutheran background, we were going to church at that time and everything, that just didn't go well. What's ironic about it is how I managed the path that I'm on now. And also even location a bit makes it ironic, because I started questioning things from that point on as well. And I kind of went to a period where I was probably more, not so much agnostic, I guess agnostic, not in the sense that something's out there but it's not overseeing our path. It was just something's out there. I had experiences with it. I knew it was there, but I didn't have a name, or I didn't think that it needed specifics in order to get to that path, and to get in touch with the divine, I guess. So I didn't really actively search for anything, but I had my own opinions on things. It did not sit well with me, the concept of hell. I never believed that. I never thought that if there's this divine being that loves you unconditionally, that then they're going to say, oh, no, 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 you didn't do what I asked of you, so no, you're not going to ever see me again. Even as, that's, if you look in human relationships, that's not how it works. To have a divine relationship that works that way just seemed absolutely ridiculous to me. So I had my own opinions formed on what I thought would happen after you died, and after, or how you would get to any sort of concept of heaven or anything like that. Now that's changed a bit, but I didn't believe in hell. Come to find out, this is kind of a family thing, because my grandmother got in trouble when she was attending a Catholic school, and she told the nuns that. As you can imagine, that went over very well. So, after a bit of time just kind of being in the somewhat spiritual ether, I guess, I started getting influenced by different movies. These movies ranged from Pocahontas and The Lion King. Keep in mind, I was young. just the spiritual aspects of those with Pocahontas, and the lyrics of Colors of the Wind really resonated with me at that age, and Lion King with the circle of life and that. But it wasn't until I saw the movie The Craft. I know people have talked about on here with The Craft and Practical Magic and those kind of influences. But with The Craft, I watched it. I remember wanting to see it really, really badly, and it took a while to see it. So it probably wasn't right when it came out, but it was fairly recently after it came out. And I watched it, and I thought, well, there's no way you're going to be able to fly, and I guarantee you all the Hollywood stuff is actually BS. But is there anything out there like that? And so I went to the early days of the internet. I was lucky in that regard that we did have AOL, and those were my first influences, were the web pages on AOL and stuff. Somehow I managed to get at least somewhat decent information, especially for the time. And I know I did quite a bit of research before I told my mom. And my mom was initially kind of hesitant, but then she went and did her own research. And the hugely funny thing with that is once she started doing her own research, it led to her finding her own path. So I thought that was kind of a neat thing, especially since now I have her notes and stuff from that time period, because she passed away in 2001. But yeah, The Craft is what got me actively seeking. And I was very, very lucky in the fact that my mom was quite supportive after she got past that initial, I guess, shock phase. She was never like, oh my God, no, you're bringing the devil into the house. She was never like that. But she was initially hesitant just because of the propaganda that can end up going around. And fortunately, she was not closed-minded enough to just say, no. She actually went and did some research herself, which I think is absolutely amazing. And so I think my first book that I really remember getting is because we went to a metaphysical bookstore. And this is probably another thing that works in my favor too, is apparently my great-grandmother dabbled a bit back in the day, because I have some of her stuff too. She had some tarot cards. She had the encyclopedia called Man, Myth, and Magic. She had a Ouija board. There was like a pendulum game called Mystic Eye or something like that. This was probably back in the 70s, maybe late 60s, early 70s is when she had this kind of stuff. She was no longer active in that, and I can't claim any sort of family tradition because nothing was passed down to me, but that did play in my favor, sort of, because I think my great-grandmother had some bad experiences with some stuff because she kind of turned her back on that. But yeah, my first book, though, was Green Witchcraft by Anne Mora. At least that's the one I think was the first book. I can't really remember if it was the first book, but I remember going to the local metaphysical bookstore and we picked that up. It was a bookstore back called The Open Door. And it was the oldest running bookstore in the area, and it unfortunately is no longer really functioning. A lot of our metaphysical bookstores in town have closed down due to internet, which is unfortunate in a lot of ways, because there are certain things you just can't get on the computer. It helps to have the book in your hand, and tools and stuff. They had a small selection of jewelry, and they always had like an athame or two, cauldrons, etc., statues, things like that. They're no longer here. And then over the years, from that point of the beginnings of my path, evolved. I was probably more involved as a teenager than as a young adult. I had my oldest daughter at 18, so that was definitely a factor into that, is being busy as a new mom. And also double whammy with having my daughter at 18, when my daughter was 2.5 weeks old, was when my mom passed away. So that was a substantial bit to deal with right at the beginning of adulthood. So I know I had some altars set up at my first house, but I definitely had more time as a teenager as far as doing meditations and things like that. I kind of lapsed a bit, probably about the time my daughter went into preschool, if not a little bit before that, just because having a space set up was difficult when you have a toddler in the house. Especially because she really liked to find things and demolish them. I had a couple of card decks and stuff that I don't have anymore because she found them when she was 2. And also, there came in the fact, and this will partially be covered in the next video, because when my daughter started preschool is when you start thinking about the what are others gonna think. I was definitely never in the broom closet as a teenager. Going to be 2. But I think that's pretty much it for as far as how I found my path. I just remember with the craft, they talk about mana, but I quickly found out that's not the concept of deity that actually exists in the broader spectrum of paganism. Not that there's one concept of deity, there are many, but the idea of it being a male figure, but I liked it's the rocks, it's the moon, it's everywhere, it's everything, bit that came from the craft. And I find that I actually have quite a few references that come from that movie because I watched it a lot. I also really did enjoy Practical Magic, but that came out a little bit later, so that was definitely not my first influence. Let's see. I was one of those that read everything I could get my hands on at the time, which included web pages, dial-up internet, and flash sessions. In fact, I have my mom's notes and stuff. She had a recipe exchange from a pagan recipe mailing list from that time period too. So there was, yeah, that's it. That's my story of how I found my path. It was influenced by many things and finally culminated into what it is now.